I'm going to read for you some of the Jehovah's false witness hypocrisy and the doublespeak that they use. And this is common in all of their literature and everything that they do and everything that they promote. They speak out of both sides of their mouth. They want to have things both ways. And I'm going to give you a perfect example of this. This is straight from their website, jw.org. This isn't from someone who's angry with the Jehovah's Witnesses. This is what they teach. This is on their website. I'm going to read this for you because this is their explanation of Gehenna. And they say, it is no symbol of everlasting torment. Nope, can't be. Why? Because the Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe that hell is a place of everlasting, eternal torture or torment. They believe in annihilation. They believe that people who are not saved, they just get, they go to hell, but then they're just burned up and they just cease to exist. And they're separated from God eternally, and that is torture in and of itself, just not being with God. Or they just don't even, they just say they don't even have consciousness, right? They're separated from God and they don't have any consciousness, and that's hell. They cease to exist. So I'm going to read you their explanation of this, and especially when it comes to Gehenna, because we'll get into it. I'm going to read this for you. Here's what they say. Jesus Christ associated fire with Gehenna, and then it gives a few text verses in Matthew and Mark, which it's not even all of them. They just list a couple there. And it's very interesting the way they do that too. It says, as did the disciple James, the only biblical writer besides Matthew, Mark, and Luke to use the word. James 3:6 is the reference there. It says, some commentators endeavor to link such fiery characteristic of Gehenna with the burning of human sacrifices that was carried on prior to Josiah's reign, and on this basis hold that Gehenna was used by Jesus as a symbol of everlasting torment. So they're saying some commentators will say that, this is why Gehenna was used as this symbol of everlasting torment that Jesus taught. And they're saying, some people will say that, but they're going to explain why that's not the case. They say, however, since Jehovah God expressed repugnance for such practice, saying that it was a thing that I had not commanded and that had not come into my heart, it seems most unlikely that God's Son, in discussing divine judgment, would make such idolatrous practice the basis for the symbolic meaning of Gehenna. It may be noted that God prophetically decreed that the Valley of Hinnom would serve as a place for mass disposal of dead bodies rather than for the torture of live victims. So I'm going to repeat what they're saying here, and just because they add a lot of fluff to it, but when you boil it down, what they're saying is it's unlikely that Jesus, that God's Son, in referring to the divine judgment and referring to the afterlife, would use an idolatrous practice of people sacrificing their children as a symbolic meaning for Gehenna. They're saying it's unlikely that he would even do that because God hated that practice and disapproved of it, then he wouldn't use that. I mean, there's no way he would use that to talk about Gehenna and talk about divine judgment, right? They're about divine judgment as like this godly, like this good thing or whatever, which it is. I get that, but they're trying to spin this as, well, God would never use something so wicked in his divine plan, right? Even as a symbol. But then in the next words on this website says, the symbolic of complete destruction. So their header was, the first one I just read, no symbol of everlasting torment, symbolic of complete destruction, because that's their doctrine, right? So they're saying it's not torture, it's just total destruction, and that's what the symbolism is. So they say this, it is evident that Jesus used Gehenna as representative of our utter destruction. Well, wait a minute. I thought Jesus was above using such an idolatrous practice in God's divine judgment. You see, when they use those words and they'll use that argument when they don't like it being about torture, but then they say, well, no, it actually is about divine judgment. Well, which one is it? Because you just said both within a few sentences. But the followers of this false religion won't see that because they're full of pride. Because they want to sound so smart. Oh, you don't know what Gehenna is. You don't know what this place is actually talking about. This isn't talking about everlasting torture. This is talking about a place of destruction. This is where they went and they just burned bodies and their refuse and their garbage. They just burned it up and it went away. It didn't last forever and ever, ever. So that can't be referring to Gehenna. Well, yeah, because it's physical. When you physically burn stuff, it is going to burn up here. That's why, hell is talking about your soul being burned. Because that doesn't just go away. But then they buy into the Jewish fables that hell is not real, because that's ultimately where it comes from. It comes from Jewish fables. The Jehovah's Witnesses didn't come up with that on their own either. They stole it from the Jews.